Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam. We have plenty to get to today, from Lando Norris's win to the big McLaren head-to-head battle, Max Verstappen getting taken out in the first corner at his team's home race.
Yeah, man, what a great weekend of racing that was. We got some real intense battles at the top, throughout the midfield, all the way down. So, a real entertaining race in my book. And yeah, a great weekend and glad to be back.
Yeah, definitely a busy race, a race that I really enjoyed actually. I thought there was some good action all the way throughout. I mean, the middle part was a bit stale at points, but there was still a lot to watch just in terms of the delta between the McLarens and a lot else through the field. But to get to the race itself, Lando Norris wins the Austrian Grand Prix. Kind of gets back on track after I'd say he hit the low point of his season, of which there's been a few so far. Last time out, though, in Canada, he came, in a collision with his teammate trying to make a pass, took himself out. His teammate went on to finish the race and extend that championship lead. So I'd say last time out in Canada was the low point, but I think he really rebounded this time. Was the fastest in every session he took part in this weekend. Didn't participate in FP1, but FP2, FP3, all the qualifying sessions, and obviously he won the race. So I think there was a lot of positives to take away from Lando this weekend. Kind of, leaning towards the question, is he back? Is this kind of back to the Lando Norris that we have expected to see really the last 2 years? To be honest, last year wasn't great, and this year hasn't started off as well as I think he would have hoped. There's been a lot of hype around Lando for most of his career, and it feels like this race weekend he kind of lived up to that in almost every way.
Yeah, this is exactly what the kind of weekend that we were looking for from Lando Norris. I mean, really, after that weekend in Canada, that could have been the end of his title challenge, or at least the turning point. Certainly, maybe too soon to call it the end, but that could have been the point that we all look back on at the end of the year and think that was his chance, that was his moment. And now he comes back out here in Austria and dominates, like you mentioned, P1 in every session that he took part in. It doesn't get more dominant than that. Taking care of business on track, keeping Oscar behind, defending well, racing a really smart race. That's exactly what we were looking for from Lando. And certainly, even if he's still behind Oscar for the moment, it certainly feels like there might be a charge coming here, and we'd love to see that, certainly, as fans.
Yeah, it's weird because to me, I want to say it was like a complete dominant weekend, and in many ways it was. Like we've said, leading every session, winning the race, putting it on pole by a pretty significant margin. But also, if you look at it, Oscar was pretty much there with Norris the entire race. And it wasn't like Lando, it wasn't one of those ones where they run away and finish 10, 15 seconds out ahead of everybody else. Oscar had, his moments and his chances to win that race, certainly, on his own. So it's like, yeah, it was a very dominant performance, but I think that speaks more to just how close these two are and how close they are in the McLaren right now than anything that, like Lando wasn't able to pull away. I think once you get those two guys out front, with no one in front of them, no one between them, they're pretty much going to run the same lap times. It's going to be very hard to make any sort of moves from there on out. And we've said that many times this year. And I think that this race kind of really solidified that, as in, if you make it through turn one in the lead, as long as you don't make any mistakes, you should be the McLaren that comes out on top in the end. And that's what we saw from Lando. So yeah, I'd say in the end, it was a very dominant weekend, but it wasn't dominant in the way that we've seen from like Max in the past few years, where it's just 30-second wins. But also that has to do more with the fact that these teammates are so close, and Verstappen never really had a teammate like that to put up a challenge.
Yeah, that just goes to show the balance in this team, that either one of these guys can pick up the slack on a given weekend and be the dominant driver. We've seen the last few years with all the ups and downs with that Red Bull second seat. It was always going to be tough for anyone to keep close with Max pretty much any given Sunday. And then now we see the title fight here that even if it hasn't gotten to this level from a drama perspective, feels much more like one of those old Hamilton Rosberg a kind of title fights where these guys really go tooth and nail throughout the season and really take the battle to each other. And I think that makes it obviously a lot more exciting as fans. So yeah, even if it's not a 30, 40-second win, where a classic Max win where he's lapping the field, that's just of course, it's a credit to Max, but it's also a product of having two drivers that are very good here at McLaren and pretty level pecking order. Piastri been a little better this year, but Norris was better last year. So, that's just kind of how it goes there.
Yeah, you mentioned Rosberg and Hamilton. I feel like we bring that up a lot just because it was the most recent head-to-head teammate battle that we've had for a championship. And I would say that this one, I don't think it's going to get that contentious between these two guys. They seem, for the most part, even though they're going to be rivals because they're teammates and they're fighting for a world championship, but they seem to be able to get along for the most part. I will say, though, I don't think that Canada was the last time we'll see these two guys get together again this year. It's going to happen at some point again. We almost saw it a couple times today. Piastri had the big lockup, almost kind of like a Perez Verstappen thing in Miami a couple years back at the race start. Just almost completely wiped out his teammate there. So yeah, it just, when it's this close between these two guys, you're going to have times where you come head to head and you come to blows on track. So I think we will see that. I don't think it'll get to a point where it boils over to, like these guys hate each other level, but I will not be surprised if we see at least one, maybe two or three more incidents this year, especially when you get McLaren kind of, taking the approach that they're taking to this of letting these guys battle it out, which to me has been great and has been a breath of fresh air. But yeah, I think when you have that, you're going to have times where they get together and you just have to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, and I know they qualified first and third this weekend, but we're going to see a lot of weekends with the pace of this car where they're 1-2. We've already seen it, of course, a few times this year. So, just counting turn one or lap one incidents, we're going to see these guys duke it out a few more times this year, I'm sure. And then, later on in the race, these guys will catch each other up. And yeah, no, we might see it this weekend. We might see it the race after, but we're going to see it again very soon. These two guys battle it out. And, I think you're right. It's not going to get to a Rosberg Hamilton drama level, but I do think the tensions will boil up a little bit more as we get further down the stretch. And there's probably at least one more big incident, like race ending level incident between these guys. So yeah, we'll see how that goes and see how they handle it. But certainly a lot of action to come here in the season.
Yeah, and I think that this battle on Sunday was, it was really good because McLaren just let them race it out, and it was 20 odd laps of Oscar just trying to hunt him down, trying to find any way past, and then I thought it was a great sort of IQ, race IQ from Lando, which we've a lot of people have criticized him for these past couple of years, where he sees Oscar coming. He has the best run he's got so far down the straight between turn one and turn 2 and 3 there, and he lets him on by, and then he positions it nicely where he brakes a little bit earlier, so that he's behind at the DRS point for the next turn. Takes that out wide and switches him back, crosses him back over, and retakes the lead. That's just something I'm not sure we would have seen of the past year or two Lando, where he's kind of been in this slump kind of thing. I think maybe even earlier Lando in his career we might have seen this, but to see something like that come back, I think is maybe the most promising part of it all, because it shows you that he's clicking on every level right now, especially this past weekend. To think about a move like that, especially coming off the move in Canada too, where you just kind of made a fool of yourself for the first time really in this championship. and you come back and you take in that pressure and make that move, to have the ability to pull that off. I thought that was really good to see from Lando on his part, at least, to give him some credit, because I know he's had a lot of a lot of public opinion against him in that sort of respect of race IQ these past couple of years.
Yeah, and I think he was fantastic both on the defense and the couple occasions he did have to go on offense this weekend. I mean, he was, just after an incident like Canada, you could get very skittish there. Give Piastri too much space, or just not be as willing to, put up a fight. And instead, he was willing to be very aggressive in his defense and forcing Piastri to be aggressive on offense, seeing him make some lunges, lock up the wheels and burn some tires there. I think, very clearly Lando, came to play and was ready to do whatever it took. And I thought that took a lot of guts, because if they turn a little bit different or something happens just a little bit different and one of them goes out of the race again, then then we've got a totally different conversation on our hands here. But luckily he played his cards right, and it wasn't just luck. It was obviously a lot of skill in that too. Really a great racecraft from him.
Yeah, I think on the flip side of that too, you go to Oscar, and we've talked about how good his race IQ has been, and how he's been aggressive when he needs to be, and he's held off when he needs to be, or when he needs to do so. And yet, I feel like he made his biggest mistake of the year this season, of the year in this race, and that was not going for the move after Lando made his kind of one lone mistake of the race in 9 and 10, getting into the gravel a little bit, losing a ton of momentum up the front straight. And it feels like Oscar, I don't know if he was holding off to try and use the DRS down into the next two overtaking spots because he didn't want Lando to have it to get back past. I don't know if he was kind of mega minding himself there a little bit, but it just seemed like, you have the opportunity. You've been hunting this guy down for how many laps? I would just take that and hope that you can make the defense work up into turn 3 there, because it felt like, once Lando was able to hold on there, if Oscar wasn't going to get by at that moment, then I didn't really see him doing it again, unless Lando made a mistake and he didn't make any of the rest of the race.
No, you're right. And I actually think there was a lot that Oscar, played well this race strategy, or at least, was all right. And like, for example, the 4 second versus 1.5 second choice, that very well could have paid off, but they lose some time there on the pit stop, and it just doesn't quite work out. But yeah, I mean, going for the lunge, it certainly didn't work out. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. He maybe could have been a little more patient there, but you're right. Lando was kind of shutting the door on him, and making it to where there really wasn't a lot of opportunity to get past there.
Yeah, that just seemed like his one big opportunity, because Lando was so good on defense the rest of the race that, you have the run and the guy's just coming out of the gravel in the turn before. You have DRS as well. You'd think you'd be able to make that move. And I'm sure he could have if he kind of committed to it, but I think he just kind of outthought himself there. And yeah, like you said, there was some other moments this race where I feel like the Oscar decision of deciding to stay out a little bit longer and go for that delta, I think that was the right decision for him, because obviously what he had been doing, wasn't working. He was just going to sit there right behind, in the 1 second range behind Lando the rest of the race. I think with the way that these cars and these guys are, I feel like they're so evenly matched, and the car is so good that you have to have that tire delta. You have to have something, outside of just the normal throw them out on the track in the same conditions, same age tires. You have to have something different there to make it work, because if not, I just think their pace is so similar. I know you have the DRS, but you're able to kind of offset that in that middle to late sector of the track for Lando, where he opens it, kind of back up from point 0.4 to point 0.8, point 0.9, and then it just replays itself again. So I liked staying out and trying to get some sort of an advantage that you wouldn't otherwise have. I think that was the right strategy and the right call from Oscar. Contrary to what a lot of people think, I think a lot of people think McLaren kind of screwed him over with that decision, but that was his decision. And also, I think it was in the end the right one to just try and give him some sort of an advantage.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue with that decision was just the projection was 4 seconds, and then he ended up coming out by the time he got up to full speed about 6 seconds behind.
Yeah.
If he was closer to that 4 second projection, he probably would have gotten at least in DRS there at the end, and we would have had a lot more of a battle, even if he didn't end up coming in first. So yeah, it's more of just missing the mark a little bit there on that projection, and then on the pit stop as well that kind of cost him. So I think that the strategy was the right one. Just a little bit of a misfire there from the team. But yeah, I think Oscar made the right call there. Of course, we'll never know what the other side would have looked like, but you're right. He was really kind of struggling to get by Lando in this race, and I think that was his best opportunity to come in hot there at the end and maybe steal a win.
Yeah, I've kind of been waiting for one of these teams to let their drivers in a championship or a race battle, let their two sides of the garage also fight against each other, not just the drivers in terms of strategy. I think McLaren are doing that to a degree. I think that there is some sort of mutual understanding and respect between the two sides, but I do think that they're also trying to find a way to outdo each other. Because you could bring Oscar in the lap after Lando comes in. I think you probably just come back out right where you were before, in that same delta of 0.5 to 1 second behind, and then you're doing the same thing again. But there's also more of a chance that you're able to undercut Lando there and get ahead. So I don't know if McLaren is all out, letting their two sides of the garage, duke it out on strategy, but I think they are giving them options to where it's okay if one side out strategizes the other, and they're not just willing to go, okay, we have them 1-2, we're 10 seconds ahead of the Ferrari behind, we can just kind of run it out and cruise it out from here, and okay, Lando, you pit, and then Oscar, you pit, and we'll make sure Lando comes back out ahead. They're not doing that, and I really respect that, and I like that because it at least gives us some sort of a fight between these two guys. Whereas if not, this might have been the most boring race, of the year, and yet it was, one of the more exciting ones.
Yeah, I think they're certainly letting them race more than we see a lot of times in these title fights. I mean, they're in a position where they've already got double of Ferraris in second in the constructors standings, and there's certainly a battle right there for P2 and constructors with Mercedes. But I don't think either of those teams are. They're obviously not in striking distance, and when push comes to shove, they're going to look towards next year if either one of them feel like they can win a title. So, at this point, there's no reason not to let them fight like we talked about before. Obviously, you don't want to see them crash each other for multiple reasons, but, you don't want to see that driver relationship fracture too much. You'd like to see, if you're in a position next year where you need them to work together, where they're still willing to do so. So there's certainly things in the future to consider, but I think right now they're playing it the right way. Maybe there's a little bit of caution there still, but letting them race for the most part and kind of, not really having a say over either team's strategy and kind of see, best man wins. And I think that's the way it should be, and the way that's the most entertaining for us as well.
I have a question for you, and I'm not sure if, I think it's probably the most important question of the podcast, but and I couldn't figure it out. Do you know what the Germany situation means? They came over the radio and told Lando, what's the, to do, this is the Germany situation. And I haven't seen a good answer yet on what the Germany situation is, if it's, a callback to something or if it's just a code word. I really couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I saw some people theorizing online that maybe it was a callback to a past incident between teammates or something in Germany, of course. But I could not find a definitive answer on this, honestly. From what I saw, there seemed to be a lot of varying opinions there. There wasn't one specific race or specific moment that everyone was convinced on. So I don't know. Maybe there's some extra code word there that none of us are getting. Uh, yeah, I'm kind of lost on this one.
Okay, I'm glad I wasn't the only one that was out on that then, because I was getting worried for a little bit, but I haven't seen anyone else, figure it out either. So I didn't know if you knew or not. But moving on to probably the other big story from the race is that Max and Kimi come together on the first lap in the third corner. Uh, you know, it was one where it's obviously Kimi's fault. There's not any question about that. It wasn't obviously it wasn't a stupid decision on him either. I think looking at it, I think everyone checks up in front of him sooner than he thinks, and um, his next best option is to just kind of dart to the outside and then try and break from there, because if not, he runs right into the back of Lawson, who was directly in front of him. And once he made that kind of swerve and braked at the same time, it just locked up, and he was just a wrecking ball into turn one. And it was good to see Max kind of respect that too, and just say he's a rookie, everybody's making mistakes, like it's okay. Because if that was other people on the grid, I think Max might have had a different reaction. But yeah, I think that obviously that was Kimi's fault, but I think it does have some bigger implications for the season as well. If Max's championship hopes weren't done already, I think they're almost certainly done and gone now. 61 point deficit. It's just a tough one to climb out of at this point with the car deficit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all knew that Max had to pretty much pitch a perfect game from here on out to be in that title fight. And even though he's capable of doing that when he's on track, you can never account for incidents like this where he's just wrong place, wrong time, or maybe there were engine problem, whatever. But things like this always happen in Formula One, and it's unfortunate for Max, but I think he's alluded to it a number of times that this year wasn't a year that he particularly thought he had a chance to win a championship. So I think his championship hopes are dashed at this point. I do think all around, though, this incident was handled very well. Kimi took responsibility for it, apologized to Max for it. And Max took it well, too, and said, look, this is it's a rookie mistake, but every rookie's got to make it at some point. And that's just the way things go. This is going to happen to every driver, the best and worst of them. It's going to happen to them at some point. So I think both sides handled it really well. Just wrong place, wrong time for Max. And that really stinks, especially in Austria where he's done so well. And the Red Bull ties obviously there at the Red Bull ring. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but these things happen, I guess, in Formula One.
Yeah, it's kind of I feel like been a slow bleed the past few races for Max of this title, if there was ever a chance. And he started off the season really well, to try and keep that hope alive. I feel like we all kind of knew that at the end of the day, it just wasn't going to be in the cards for him unless that car made significant improvements. But you go back to the whole incident in Spain, dropping so many spots because of that penalty, finishing P10, only getting 1 point there. Canada, he has a nice showing, finished his second. So that was a good race, but it was one where, maybe if he's got any chance to win this championship, you got to kind of win that one, because the McLarens are finishing at best fourth, and then a DNF for Lando. Still a good race though, not taking anything away from him. Just in this position, that's probably what needed to happen. And now here the DNF wasn't his fault, but it's just kind of like this is the icing on the cake. And I don't see any coming back from this. I mean, we know how good Max is. I don't think there's anyone doubting that. It's just there's no more upgrades. I heard coming after Spa for Red Bull. I think Helmut Marko said that, and the 61 point deficit in the championship. I just think at this point, his hopes are pretty much cooked, and that kind of stinks because I was hoping he'd at least hold on and maybe keep it within punching distance. Oh, he wins a race, here, he wins a race there, and he keeps himself alive in it. And at least a discussion point to also mix it up between these two McLarens as well. But that just doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. And I don't think it has anything to do with Max. I think this car is just kind of gone by the wayside, and I think it kind of brings in a serious conversation about Adrian Newey and how good he was and how important he was. I think we all knew, but how really important he was to that team. And that conversation, that's a long conversation that doesn't have to be had today. But yeah, it's just it's not going to happen for Max this year. I think we can confidently say at this point.
Yeah, and there's just a lot going on off the track with Red Bull too. It makes sense that they wouldn't, go all in on this title fight specifically. I mean, they're fourth right now in the constructors. They're really not that far off of Ferrari and Mercedes, but given the fact that they've continually gotten next to nothing out of their second seat, I don't think it's a realistic fight for them. So, if that doesn't happen, they're pretty much locked into fourth there, and with no realistic shot now at the drivers' championship. I think that there's just no reason to go all in on this season. They've had a lot of a change at that team recently. Obviously, they're losing the Honda partnership for next season, and I think next year is a massive, massive year for them. If they fumble this engine and the car doesn't look great, still hard to drive, then it could be a real setback for them as a team. They could lose Max, all these different things. So I think it's smart for them to kind of, just punt on this year, not bother with any further upgrades and really lock in for 26, because they've got to be at least decent to keep Max around and keep their title hopes around until the next regulations.
Yeah, well, look, they're a one car team right now. I mean, they're out there competing with one guy, and that's Max. So for anything in the constructors, I mean, realistically, and I know that this is not feasible because you don't have two Maxes. It'd be almost impossible to have anyone else competing at the level that Max is right now in that car, just because the car is such a specific car to drive that even some of the other great drivers, I think if they come in there, they get they don't have very good results right now. So that's a one car team at the moment, and there's just no way that even if the Ferraris have been a little off pace at times this year, you still have Leclerc and Hamilton. A one car team's not going to beat them. You have at Mercedes, Russell having his best season, Antonelli showing promise at times, and Mercedes, I think, has been confidently the second fastest car. If you look at the entirety of the season so far this year, and so you would hope if you're with what you're getting out of one side of the garage, if you're any other team, that we should be finishing second here, but it's just such a different situation for Red Bull that I think fourth is probably where they'll end up. And even if Max, I could still see Max finishing third in the championship and they end up fourth in the constructors. I just don't. They're not going to get anything from that second car. I think that's been kind of proven at this point with, and we'll get to it a little bit more later. At least I think I will. But the whole Yuki situation now, we haven't seen much there. Liam, obviously, that was a mess, and Perez. I still don't know what to make of Perez in that whole tenure. But yeah, that's also a bigger conversation.
Yeah, whatever they do with this next car, they got to find a way to make it more drivable for more than one person, because we've seen a lot of very capable drivers come through there, guys that I would trust to drive at top teams, the Gaslys and Albons, and then we've seen like a Lawson come through and look terrible and then come out the other side and seems to be getting better by the week. So it's whatever they do with the next regs, they got to make it to where they can get points out of both cars and not make it so Max suited, even though he's kind of their golden ticket at the moment. we'll see how that goes. I really feel like they are the biggest wild card um, going forward from 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot that could happen there next year, and I think we'll get to a little bit more of that later with some more Mac stuff. Moving on to a little bit of a happier note for some teams on the grid. Sauber double points finished first one of the season with Bortoleto getting his first points in F1. He had an excellent qualifying session and then follow that up with a really good race as well. Battling really hard with Alonso at the end, and one that I think might have, ended in Bortoleto getting ahead had it not been for the leaders coming through in those final couple laps. So yeah, I think it was a great performance from Bortoleto. Hulkenberg as well. I thought that he'd follow up with his third straight weekend of points here, and he did. I didn't really think so after qualifying ended. But that was also a heck of a drive from him. I mean, my goodness, coming from that far back in the Sauber, it's just incredible what he's doing this year. So yeah, I think it was a really good weekend for Sauber, and I'm really happy to see it because what we saw from them last year, I mean, you might as well have just not been on the grid at that point. It was like Haas 2021, 2020 levels of bad. So yeah, really happy for those guys at Sauber and for Bortoleto as well. It was a very promising weekend. Good to see some signs of life from him in his first season.
Yeah, I think we saw the Gabriel Bortoleto that we all thought was in there. We all thought the potential was there, but that team was just so far off, or it felt that way at the start of the season. And they've really, they might not be amazing, but at least now they're giving these two guys a chance to shine. They're two very capable drivers that are probably deserving of a better car, both of them. And they're really making the most out of that situation now. They're only 3 points off of Haas for seventh in the team standings at the moment. Yeah,
What?
already.
That's
Yeah.
news to me.
Yeah, so they're on 26. Aston Martin is eighth on 28, and Haas is seventh with 29. So we're gonna have a little bit of a battle here, maybe. I mean, Sauber's just getting better as the season goes along, and I really, honestly, as a pairing, I probably trust those two guys more than any of those other three pairings. It, I really see a lot of potential with these guys, and I'm excited to see where they go from here next year with Audi and maybe some more resources there. I think the sky's the limit for these two as a pairing together.
Yeah, I think Alpine should be ashamed of themselves at this point, to be honest. How are you getting, smoked by Kick Sauber by 15 points in the championship? Only 11 points for Alpine. They obviously have their whole set of issues with the second driver situation. But it seemed like they were on such a good trajectory at the end of last year. Gasly was doing great. Obviously, they had Ocon score second in Brazil in that wet race. And now this year they're coming out and laying stinkers every week. They're just not really particularly close anywhere. And the Sauber looks fast. I mean, it's got some speed to it. It's not like it's come out of nowhere. They had an upgrade, I think, to the floor. And ever since then, Hulkenberg 3 straight point finishes. He obviously did well in Australia in the wet too. So yeah, it's just been a great year for Kick Sauber, and for to even have the possibility of finishing seventh is incredible. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that there'd be any race weekend this year where Kick Sauber would outscore Red Bull, I would have probably laughed. So I think that just shows you where they're at right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I got like midway through my point there about Sauber, and then I looked down at Alpine and almost just like totally 180'd it and started talking about them because it's such a disaster right now.
It's disgusting.
It's another team with a lot of backroom drama, of course, with Briatore coming back on, and now, like you mentioned, the disastrous second seat that they've been trying to fill and just hasn't worked out. So, yeah, I fascinated by them at the moment. I don't really know where they're going, what they're doing. Um, what they're going to look like in the future. That's just a total another team that's a total wild card right now.
This was supposed to be a happy point. I'm sorry. I brought Alpine into this and I ruined it. We were supposed to be celebrating Kick Sauber. Instead, we're poo-pooing on Alpine. And now we're going to have to poo-poo on another team, another midfield team, Williams. Double DNF for them. A tough couple of weeks after starting off really hot. Freaking Sainz's brakes got a little too hot maybe at the beginning. But yeah, it just wasn't a good weekend for them. I'm not sure why Albon retired. Did you get any? Do you know why he retired? I'm not really sure, but it was just a tough weekend for them, and one that they're going to want to forget going forward, because it's been such a good start to the season, and I still have a lot of faith and a lot of hope in them, for the rest of the year, that they might score some really solid points. But this season was not a good one at all.
No, the Albon retirement was a bizarre one, because I watched that live, and either they didn't show it or I looked away for 2 seconds and missed it. I don't know. And then I went back and watched the highlights today, and they showed him kind of getting dragged into the garage, but I don't think I heard a reason. So it's kind of that was one of the more bizarre retirements of the year. He was running pretty well, and that's really kind of the tough part of this for Williams. Is even though they didn't have their best qualifying, there was potentially points on the table with all the trouble in front of them. And, we saw this race, like Hulkenberg, we just mentioned, guys coming from the back to make some noise. So, this could have been a nice little weekend for them. And instead, it's a really disaster. And, a few weekends here recently where we've been kind of, I still believe in vowels. I still believe in the vision, but really kind of, questioning just how good this year's going to be after such a great start.
Yeah. I feel like, it was a bad weekend, but I still think that they're pretty solidly locked into fifth here, unless, Racing Bulls has one of those like Alpine at Brazil weekends last year where they somehow get, a second and third, or a fourth and a fifth, or, some really great points in a bizarre race. Just because I think Williams has more pace just generally throughout the year. I think there's some tracks where they really struggle, but for the most part, they just have the pace. Racing Bulls too, though, in sixth. Lawson had a great weekend as well. P6 finished for him, and Hazard's been really good this year, so maybe they catch them, but I still think Williams has the edge, and really they just got to kick Sainz into shape, because I feel like this has not been a great start to the Williams kind of era for Sainz at Williams. He's just getting pretty obliterated by Albon here. I think he'll turn it around. I think the Williams probably is just such a different car to the Ferrari that he's driven the past few years. And we've seen guys take time to adjust to a new car when they change teams. So I'll be worried about it if we don't see some significant improvements by the end of the year for Sainz. But right now, I'm not too worried about that part. It's more just holding on from the Racing Bulls behind, which I think they'll be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would give Sainz a break for the brake issues, no pun intended, but he did qualify 19th, so that was a little bit shocking from him. Yeah, I do think, they have a 19-point advantage on the Racing Bulls right now. You're right. They're certainly favored to come in fifth, and that would be a successful season for them, a very successful given where they're coming from. I do think, though, that we're going to have a couple more weekends where we get, some big points from the Racing Bulls. Like you mentioned, Hadjar's been great, and Lawson's starting to find his form here. He was really extremely impressive this weekend. It's going to be tough when we get to these podiums in a few minutes, because I really had a hard time. All these guys, 6 through 9 or 10, were all very deserving. And then, of course, our actual top 3 or 4 in the race. So, quite a standout weekend for a lot of those guys in the midfield, except for Williams.
Yeah. Well, let's get to our personal podiums now. I feel like similar. It was, it was difficult to pick your personal podium here. I thought there were a lot of good finishes. I also thought that there were a lot of bad results this weekend as well. So it was kind of really lopsided one way or the other. Not many guys just had average races except maybe like, Lance Stroll, which he seems to do pretty much every week. But I'll start personal podium in number one, Gabriel Bortoleto scoring those first points in F1 along with the qualifying session. I just think it was a fabulous weekend for him. It was great to see him and Alonso after the race. Alonso come over and give him some high fives and a hug. Alonso, part of Bortoleto's management team, so that was great to see. But I really think that we will see some more from Bortoleto this year, and hopefully in the future once Audi kind of takes over the operation there. I think that driver lineup is actually really good. Hulkenberg and Bortoleto, those two have been really solid this year. In second, I have Liam Lawson, finished P6 on the one-stop strategy. I'm not sure they really even needed to go off strategy to get that finish, but they did, and they really made it work. So I thought Lawson was great. This is his highest finish in F1, which kind of surprised me, because he was so good when he came in to fill in that first time. But yeah, it was a great race from him. And I'm really excited to see if this continues because, like we were just mentioning, Hadjar's been great this year. And if Lawson can kind of refine his form after the kind of embarrassing exit from Red Bull early on this year, I think has to be reconsidered for some quality seats because we've seen what Yuki's done, and I think Yuki's been slightly better than Liam in that car, but it hasn't been that much better. So yeah, I think it was great because Lawson looked to be the better of the two racing bulls for the first time this season throughout the entirety of a weekend. And I hope that continues for Lawson. I do like Lawson. I like the way he, his mentality and the way he goes about it, not really scared of anything. And I think kind of resetting from the Red Bull situation, kind of also to do this, at the home race of Red Bull where he's the top finishing Red Bull, I think was, kind of a sick thing for him to do as well. With Max out, with Yuki out, and with Hadjar, just kind of fiddling around a little bit in this race, not really doing too much. So good race from Lawson. And then in third, I had the race winner, Lando Norris, just with the momentum of this championship. I think that this weekend was huge for him to win, if not to finish ahead of Oscar. He did both things. And it was his best race, I'd say, overall in a while. He's had races where he's finished farther ahead, and I'd say maybe even done better, but just to handle the pressure and to not really put a foot wrong other than that one slight mistake, but he got away with that. And I think it was a really good weekend from Lando, and one that hopefully will push along into this weekend at Silverstone as well.
Yeah, this was, like I just mentioned, one of the hardest ones that we've done. I went a little bit different with the order here. I went Lando first. Just, even with the advantage that McLaren has at the moment, when somebody comes a P1 in every session for the weekend, kind of hard not to put them in first for me, although, those other performances were great as well. It was really a toss up at the end. I went with Bortoleto second. Everything you mentioned to do what he did in a Sauber is just so impressive. And, it was just such a tough. I ended up going with a Lawson third, but just so tough to pick between Bortoleto and Hulkenberg there. Just how you judge that. I mean, starting eighth and finishing eighth, in one way is also very impressive, to not lose any ground there in the Sauber against a lot of the top cars, as an extremely impressive performance. Even, it's tough to judge against going from 20th to 9th, but yeah, that's just kind of where I leaned. Bortoleto being the slightly better car for the weekend. And then Lawson, there's really a conversation to be had. I don't think that he's going to be really up for the top team seats at the moment, but I do think that he's going to have a longer stay here at VCarb, and now it's kind of looking like Yuki may be the odd man out, just given how much time he's been in Formula One. Maybe they keep Lawson around at V-Carb and give Hadjar the shot at Red Bull, and then bring up Lindblad or somebody else to take that second V-Carb seat. That's kind of, I think, where the chips would fall at the moment if they had to make a decision. So, he's certainly at least buying himself some more time at Formula One. And just from what we've seen of him as of recent, he certainly deserves it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that this driver market could go moving forward. But yeah, I think that was a really good podium, similar to mine, but a different order. A lot of other guys you could have put there. A good performance from Alonso again. Hulkenberg, I think, really deserved a shot there. I just had Bortoleto ahead solely because it was his first points in F1. You could say the 20th to 9th, 19th to 9th, actually, because, signs. But the 19th was, maybe more impressive. But I think it was, you got to put Bortoleto there first points. And then Lawson, I thought he deserved it a little bit ahead because it was his highest finish and kind of turning things around for his season. And then Lando's drive I thought was spectacular. So there's just not a lot of room to add more guys in, but I thought there were some really good drives out there as well. Other than that, for stinker of the week, a lot of ways we could go here as well. You could go Williams, you could go Antonelli for, dive bomb Antonelli. You could go, you could go a lot of different ways. You could say Red Bull as a whole. I'm going to take Yuki here. I just think at Red Bull's home race puts up a stinker in qualifying, doesn't even get out of Q3. A little bit of a Perez special there. And then has a little pace in the race, or has little pace in the race, not much pace at all. Before he comes together with Colapinto, also came together with one of the Aston Martins, but the Colapinto one gets him a penalty, has to change the front wing as well. He's down now through 2 pit stops, the 10-second penalty. Ultimately finishes 2 laps down, the only guy to do that. Just kind of a sloppy weekend for him all around. And it's been tough because, it's so hard to judge that second seat and how a guy's performing there. But it's also like this weekend was pretty obvious that something, just wasn't clicking for him. Not even just that he was slow, just that he was making kind of mistakes left and right with the Colapinto battle, with the Aston battle, with, just a poor qualifying lap. So, yeah, I went with Yuki. I think, like you said, it's very interesting to see how this whole Red Bull thing shakes out going forwards. But yeah, it was a tough weekend for Tsunoda.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was equally difficult to do stinker of the week this week. All the names you mentioned, plus I'd throw a Colapinto in there as well for another pretty rough performance, and the whole Piastri incident and all that, not great. But I'm for my number one pick, I guess here. I'm just going to go with Williams. Not even getting Sainz's car to the start of the race effectively, and then this mysterious Albon DNF as well. A real chance for them to snag some points even after a pretty mediocre qualifying, and they just couldn't deliver. Again, not a long-term indictment on the team or anything. I think it's going to be okay, but they are going to need more out of Sainz and a more reliability out of the car here, going forward, just to really lock down that P5 spot and do what they want to do. Maybe get some more big points finishes. Even challenging for top 5, top 6 in some of these races. They're fully capable of it. I mean, we just saw Lawson finish P6 and inarguably worse car, but they're just not. They've kind of lost their stride these last few race weekends, and I'm hoping to see him get it back soon.
Top 5 F1 conspiracy theories: Albon mysterious DNF at Austria 2025. I think that has to be on there.
Yeah, it'll be right up there, right at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, right up there with the Fernando testing crash and all the other ones. Colapinto, moving on to him, he will race in Silverstone for Alpine, but then the seat will be rejudged on a per race basis moving forwards. After this 5 race test trial that we've seen from him, after Duan got his own little test trial as well. We touched on Alpine a little bit earlier, but it continues to be a disgrace of an organization, just a laughing stock of F1 right now. And I like Alpine. I think Gasly. I love Gasly. I love to see what he does on track. I think Alpine, they always bring good liveries. I like that. They're still, one of the few kind of independent teams, although next year they will have that Mercedes engine, which might make them, a little bit faster by default. But it just what they're doing just at like an organizational level for a few years now, I just haven't really understood it. The whole Piastri kind of debacle, putting Ocon and Gasly together as teammates, when they're, pretty obviously rivals from childhood on, and then now with this whole this whole Duan to Colapinto to whoever is going to be next thing in this second seat. I just don't understand it. They're not giving anyone time to really settle in and try and get some good performances. I still think Duan is a very solid driver. Here with Colapinto, we saw what he was able to do in a decent car in the Williams last year. It just seems like they're just, I don't know what they're doing, to be honest. They're not giving anybody any time to figure it out except for Gasly. It's just my Alpine disappointment runs deep, because I would love to see them do much better than they are, but it's just not happening at this point. I think it's very much an organizational thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't wrap my head around a per race, situation like that. It doesn't make any
How do you
sense to
expect
me.
anyone to perform like that? Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand.
and
They're going to have all the pressure in the world on them every race weekend. You think that the young guy's going to make some mistakes? Probably, with that much pressure. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know.
and then what's the line of pulling the trigger and making the change versus keeping
Yeah.
him in the seat, and that yeah, it just continues to be a mystery. We talked about this a couple weeks ago and kind of what to do here, and we're still kind of stuck in the same situation. Another disappointing race from Colapinto, and now, yeah, you're looking at either keeping him in the seat or bringing back Doohan or going to Paul Aaron or whoever. I know Aaron's about to do. It just got announced earlier today that Aaron's going to do a couple of practice sessions with Sauber. That Alpine is kind of loaning him out to do that. So maybe getting a little bit of experience. I don't know. It's a total mystery right now, and there's really, I think all you can do at this point is just pick a guy and go all in on for the rest of this year, and then obviously, unless they are lights out from here on out, I'll look to upgrade next year, see whatever you can find in the driver's market, and whoever's willing to come your way.
Yeah, if you're gonna go for like a 5 race thing, that's fine. Just like make that known at the beginning of the year, and just go on and say, this guy gets these 5, 6, 7 races. This guy gets the next 6. This guy gets the next 7. Like, he just like lean all into it. This whole per race thing, and no one really knowing exactly what's going on. It's creating more speculation. It's creating more issues. More like focus on what's going to happen with that seat. They're not setting up anyone for success there at that team. And like, if you're going to keep bringing guys in, like, try Mick, or try, he's in your WEC program, try whoever. Like, if you're going to do it, really lean into it. But if not, like, just stick with someone and just ride it out for the rest of the year. And maybe, help them gain some confidence and help them gain some understanding of how to drive that car. The Alpine thing, just, every time we bring this up, and I'm sure it'll get brought up again when they either drop Colapinto or keep him and say it's the next race we'll judge. It'll just keep getting brought up. So we're monitoring it. We'll keep covering it, and we'll keep until something changes. Discussing how much of a disgrace they are at the moment.
Yeah, that's all we can do is just monitor the situation, I guess.
Or at least I will. I will not let this go quietly. I will keep the pressure on Alpine to change things. And I'm not even an
Well,
Alpine fan. Something's got to change. It's just not good.
yeah, we won't let this go unmonitored.
No, no, we will not. The people at the Final Lap podcast have an eye on it, Mr. Alpine, Big Alpine.
We'll be
Um,
there no matter what.
uh, moving to some other rumors, the Max to Mercedes rumors are back again. I'm not sure what to make of this. It seems like we go through this once at least every couple months. To me, until I see any like concrete evidence that this might actually happen, I'm just going to chalk it up to rumors and leave it at that. But do you think that this is kind of a more realistic thing than it has been the past couple times it's been brought up, or is it kind of same old, same old?
I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking. I think it might be like 10% more realistic or something. That's not exact, but slightly more realistic. If the rumors are true about Mercedes being in a good spot for next year, we know that the interest has clearly been there for years from Toto towards Max. So, if Max feels it's the right decision, then there might be some real traction there. I think the fact that they haven't given George that extension yet certainly shows that at least they're interested very clearly. Mercedes is in Max. So now it's just kind of a waiting game of, I think it'll be clear if this looks more legitimate here in the next couple of weeks. It'll be a clear sign of where Red Bull is heading as a team because Max in the past has very adamantly denied rumors, whether it's Mercedes or Aston Martin or another one of these teams that has made their approach to him. So I think we're going to get a little more clarity in the next couple of weeks here. I certainly don't think I still think it's more likely that he stays at Red Bull, but I do think there's like slightly more traction than there has been the last couple times these rumors have come up.
Yeah, I think that's interesting with the Russell and Antonelli seats not being extended yet. My thing there is, who do you get rid of the two? I mean, obviously, if you have the chance to take Max, you probably take it. But Russell's having the best season of his career. I think if he is given the right opportunity and the right car, he could be, he's world champion material in the right situation. Not sure you want to give up on him. And he and Max have a very interesting relationship that has had its highs and lows, certainly. And I don't think they seem like the best of friends. I'm not sure how that would get along in an inter-team battle. And then Antonelli, I think, if you sit down and say, do you want to take Max Verstappen or Kimi Antonelli, you pick Max Verstappen every time. But it's also the whole reason I feel like Toto, moved up Antonelli so quickly to Mercedes is he missed out on that Max situation, bringing a young guy in and just kind of letting, the team build around him and kind of centering that focus on him and having him on your squad. So I don't know if Toto would just kind of go back on that if they just send Kimi to reserve driver for a year or two while they figure everything else out. I'm not really sure exactly what goes on there because I think with the driver lineup that they have now, like I said, you probably jump on the chance that if you have to take Max, but who of the two do you get rid of to kind of make that team dynamic and everything else work there?
Yeah, I guess there's a world where they maybe loan out Antonelli like they've done in the past, sort of loan a driver to a Williams or someone. I don't think it will be Williams this time, but
Maybe
whoever has
Alpine.
an
Maybe
open
they'll get
seat.
another driver.
Yeah, it could be Alpine, or it could even be a Cadillac or someone like that. Potentially. I don't know exactly if that lines up realistically, but we'll see. The options there on the table potentially. I think going into this, I think the conventional wisdom has been that they would drop Russell, which is, like you mentioned, kind of crazy because he's been one of the best drivers this year. But if they have this one shot at Max, and we know that they probably would not work as teammates really, so you have your driver of the present with Max, and then your driver of the future with Antonelli. I think an underrated part of this too is there's obviously still a long way towards this maybe or maybe not happening. But if it does, Russell could be in a really, really tough spot here with the seats that are available. It looks
Yeah.
pretty grim right now for next year, unless there's a retirement or something. So, this is, like we mentioned, more likely than not, everybody will stay in place. But if one domino falls here, we're going to see a lot of pretty wild dominoes falling after that for sure.
Yeah, because I can't see Russell just sitting on the sideline for a year. I think someone's got to take him. It'd suck for him to go to a crap team again and kind of start over. But none of the really big teams have an opening at the moment to kind of fill that hole. I mean, maybe it'd become an Aston Martin thing with Fernando retiring, maybe, or something like a bunch of stuff would have to happen. And it would definitely create a scenario where the whole grid might look, completely different next year. Cause like you said, dominoes are just going to start to fall and there'd be a lot of changes, which would be really something to see because this past off season, I feel like there were a lot of changes with so many guys, leaving and new guys coming in, but this would really, really shake things up. Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, the only one of the current top teams that would have an open seat would be Red Bull, and like we just mentioned, they're a total wild card for next year. They could be, the best team, or honestly, they could be like a lower midfield. Like they could really struggle with new regs. So that's and you never know too. We just saw this with the Ferrari. And Hamilton and Sainz not going to Mercedes, you never know how a team feels about a direct driver swap like that. If that doesn't work out, I did look at Aston Martin, but right now they've got two drivers under contract for next year. So unless one of those guys decides to, decides to leave, I don't see that happening at the moment. And, that's really the two paths is join a current top four team or join a team with promise like Aston Martin. But unfortunately, right now, other than like a Racing Bulls, which obviously wouldn't go to, his two options would be Cadillac or Alpine, which as far as next year's title chances, neither looks particularly ideal.
Yeah, I just can't picture George in anything other than like Mercedes. I mean, obviously he was in the Williams, but in anything other than like that, Mercedes kind of vibe. Like I couldn't see him in a Red Bull or in a Ferrari situation. Like it just looked weird. Like to me, him and Mercedes makes sense. Him and like Aston Martin makes sense just from an overall like standpoint. Not saying anything about the situation with what he wants with the car and anything like that. Just seeing him in something other than like Mercedes or Aston Martin, like any of those typical like kind of like posh style, like high fancy teams. Just I mean, obviously Ferrari is too, but it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually think that Aston Martin makes a lot of sense
Yeah,
for him in that regard.
yeah,
The whole very English brand, of
yeah,
course, James Bond drives an Aston Martin and everything. And then, seeing George in there, like the most sort of posh English guy on the grid, I feel like in a certain way would make a lot of sense. And they are a team with a lot of promise. So if one of those seats comes open, or maybe they just decide to cut ties with Alonso, just because of his age, I don't know. But I think if that opportunity does come, and Mercedes decides to move on, that you should jump at it for sure. But of course, we're jumping ahead here a little bit.
yeah, definitely. Last thing before we wrap up, the Austrian Grand Prix got extended to 2041. F1's really going all out on these, long-term extensions for some of these races. I'm very happy with this because I love this race. I think this track always produces some good excitement, plenty of overtaking opportunities. I think the fans are great. The whole vibe is really good with the Red Bull being the focus, obviously, but yeah, I just think it's a great event. One of the ones that I was kind of sitting there this weekend, and obviously, as a fan, you want to go to the Spas and the Suzukas and the Silverstones, and and all that. But I was like, I would really actually love this race one day. It does have some history, but it's also just seems like a really good time and a great race as well. So I'm happy this one's staying on.
Yeah, this was a slam dunk home run, whatever you want to call it. A 2041, of course, seems a little excessive, but to just have this locked in on the calendar for a while longer, it is one of the more simple looking tracks on the calendar,
Yeah,
by far. But, with the elevation changes, um, and the shorter track length, it can make for a lot of interesting racing. And with the elevation changes as well, is great for the fan experience. Like you mentioned, there's parts of that track I've never been, but just looking at clips, there's parts of that track where you can sit and you can see half the track
yeah,
during the race, which it was really cool. A lot of these races you go to, and maybe you see one or two turns. So some of the best on the calendar as far as racing and fan experience, at least from viewing the race. And yeah, I think this was a fantastic decision. Glad to see another a permanent track like this really get a vote of confidence instead of another street track or whatnot. So yeah, this was an easy call in my opinion, but the right decision anyways by F1.
yeah. I agree. I love this one. It seemed like a simple, easy decision, and they made the right one. I don't think there was any like worry that this event was up in air like Imola and that whole situation. But yeah, really happy to see they made the right decision extending this race. Yeah, that's everything for this week. We got another great race next week at Silverstone. Plenty of home drivers. George, Lewis, Ollie, and Lando will all be kind of at a home race there. Kind of a home race for Albon as well. So yeah, really really excited for that race. Obviously a great track, one that always produces some good racing. And we'll see kind of Lando try and reel that championship fight back in again in front of his home fans. See if Lewis has anything in front of his home fans to kind of maybe bring that Ferrari to a podium. George, who knows? That's kind of a wild card situation. So a lot of storylines just from the terms of it being at Silverstone and the British drivers, but then you also have Max trying to rebound, have a good weekend. Oscar trying to keep that lead in the championship. Just a lot of stuff to look forward to next weekend. So really excited for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of great storylines, but really, all I need to hear is Silverstone, and I'm in. So
Yeah.
it's one of the best tracks in the calendar, and and one of the most well regarded for a reason, not just with all of the UK's ties to F1, but also for the racing quality of racing that we've gotten there for decades now. So I'm thrilled to see another race there and see the action. It's going to be a great time.
Yep. I'm right there with you. That's everything for this episode. We will be back next week to break down everything from Silverstone, and then we got a few weeks break before we come back. We'll maybe do like a halfway point check-in or something there for the season, and then we kind of get on the roll. We'll be a couple races and then summer break, but then it's really downhill from there to the end of the championship. So super excited for what's coming up. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, a lot of action to come. Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.